Prosecuted for publishing a Facebook video and yet acquitted by a jury in just 17 minutes. This story about Jamie Michael, with full respect to the prosecutors in this case, for me is the stark example of a prosecution that should never have been brought in the first place and is an attack upon free speech in this country. Now, I'm not going to play the full video for you. You can find it online, but I'm going to play one snippet of it, which for me, if I were to have looked at this, if I were being asked my opinion on this, I would have said that this one snippet that I will show you a little bit later in the video just encapsulates the overall intention behind the video. And it is not, in my view, what he was charged with, which was publishing threatening material with intent to stir up racial hatred. And if I could just ask you one thing, if you value your free speech and you value neutral, objective input from me, a barrister, please do subscribe to the channel. I depend on you to do that, and no one else will make my channel grow. Only you, the viewer, by subscribing will help that happen. So thank you very much. Now, just to be clear, if you have negative views of a given group, etc., and you publish those, there is a boundary where the free speech, the freedom of expression, can tread just over that line into the territory of stirring up racial hatred. Now, where there are genuine concerns raised and there are genuine call to action, for example, as it will become clear in this video, a genuine call to civil action, which was done so in this video. That, for me, is quite clearly an expression of concern, an expression of your views, which you are right to express. Now, this is not blanket encouragement, advice, or otherwise to anybody just go out and say whatever you wish. Of course, there is a line and you may be prosecuted for it, as this case quite well illustrates. Now, the Free Speech Union funded the legal fees. Now, I will say if you are not a member of Free Speech Union, I would suggest that you become one. They have not asked me to do this. They've certainly not paid me to mention them here. But for the very little money for membership that they charge, I would strongly recommend you become a member of the Free Speech Union. I am a gold member myself. So I paid for that with my own money, no sponsor whatsoever. And they funded Jamie Michael's legal fees here. Now, the prosecutor in this case claimed that his language was unrelentingly negative towards migrants. Now, as I said, you can have negative views, you can express negative views towards migrants, and if you've got valid reasons for that, and it's not, it's not a blanket discrimination or anything of that sort, you are free within reason to express your views. Now, the defense here argued that, in fact, and I quote, his views were directed at the Southport killer and illegal, unchecked or radicalised immigrants. But nonetheless, this video was then reported by a member of staff of the Office of Welsh Labour. He was arrested, remanded into custody, and although he was later released on tag, then obviously waited trial, having pleaded not guilty. Now, in giving evidence, Jamie denied being racist, but admitted that his language had been clumsy in the emotional aftermath of the Southport attack. He said he felt gut-wrenched. He wanted to get some kind of security measures in place for our children. Before the trial, his solicitor wrote to the CPS asking them to drop the case, but of course they pressed on. Free Speech Union makes a very good point that this was a case prosecuted at the urging of a politician, and in which the authorities, they say, should have resisted this ostensibly political pressure given the time and the resources, and I would also add the circumstances in the aftermath of the Southport case and everything else, and the wasted resources that went into this case. After all, it took the jury less time to acquit him than the original opening statement of the case. So now let me take you to one snippet of the video which, for me, underpins the intention behind the whole video, and in my view runs entirely counter to the charge that he was intent on stirring up racial hatred. Take a listen to this very short snippet.
Start stepping up, okay? I'm facing this situation. We need to start facing this situation, which means making plans. And like I said, having meetings, going to the politicians, going to the police, going to the councillors. I'm demanding that this doesn't happen, okay? This isn't a freak incident. This is going to happen more and more and more, okay? These people now think that there's enough numbers for them to start taking over our country, and they're telling us. They think they're going to take over our country. Well, they're not. We still outnumber them about 10 to 1. Right? So anybody saying, oh, the country's gone. The country's gone. It's gone because of people like you saying it's gone, okay? We outnumber them 10 to 1. You need to start acting like a man, standing up, and like I said, organising, okay? Which doesn't mean getting bats and knives and stuff and going doing what they're doing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about doing things the right way. Getting in big groups, having meetings, and going to the council, going to the police, and going to the politicians, okay? And making sure these things happen. And if they don't happen, okay, then the council, the police and everything are asking for trouble, because they're going to move these people in here, and then we will see trouble.
And so you can hear quite clearly from that short snippet of the video that he's encouraging people to do things the right way. He's specifically saying that it's not to take up weaponry and do anything violent. It is specifically to go to the councillors, go to the politicians, MPs, etc., have meetings, take proper action to ensure the safety, to put safety measures in place. That is what he's referring to, and that is quite clearly the intent behind the video. And that is certainly my impression. Now, I can only guess as to what happened inside the jury room as to why they acquitted him in 17 minutes, but if we have a little think about what really happens, it realistically happens inside a jury room. Now, when the case has been closed, i.e. the prosecution present their case first, they end the prosecution case, then sometimes we have what we refer to a half-time submission. Defence may submit that there is no case to answer. Often that will fail, and often it's only made as a point to perhaps appeal on later. It's not always made, obviously, but then defence presents their case, which includes Jamie giving his own evidence. He's cross-examined, any other witnesses for the defence, usually thereafter, etc., and closing submissions. And then obviously the jury is invited to retire after summing up and any directions from the judge, etc. The jury is invited to retire, select a foreperson that will represent the group. They are obviously instructed not to discuss anything outside their number, not to research the case, only consider the evidence presented, etc. And then they go back to the jury room. They have coffees and teas and everything else. Obviously, they'll need to introduce each other to each other, select a foreperson within the group. Very often, I understand they will go around the table asking for any views. They may take an initial vote. It's entirely down to the jury how they reach the verdict. Now, if you think of all of that happening, they retire to the jury room. They may have a drink first. They may discuss and introduce each other first. They may, obviously, one of the first things they will do is usually select a foreperson for the group. That may happen later, but I presume that would happen relatively early on, and one person will sort of take charge of the group. And generally, then they might just take a vote to begin with. Now, obviously, if they came back with a verdict within 17 minutes, having done all of that, it didn't take very long. And the video complained of was 12 minutes long, so it's entirely possible they didn't re-watch the video. Obviously, the video would have been played in court as evidence, but they would have had the opportunity to re-watch it if they wanted to. But sure enough, after just 17 minutes, he was unanimously acquitted, upholding his right to free speech and rejecting the allegation that he'd threatened publishing material with the intent to stir up racial hatred. And I have to say that I agree, and I think, with all respect to the prosecution, I think this was a waste of time. But this raises a very, very serious question. In the argument of free speech, all those who have been prosecuted, but in particular, all of those who pleaded guilty and have been sent to prison, who perhaps only pleaded guilty because they feared being remanded into custody, or they feared being found guilty because of everything that was going on, because of all of the news coverage of people being prosecuted for these offences. And so, as a result, for whatever their reason was, they chose to plead guilty. Now, interestingly enough, the barrister representing Jamie Michael, Barrister Adam King, was on GB News to give his views, and I have to say I completely agree with those views, which I'm going to play for you now, and I will link this in the description below.
Do you think that there are people in prison now for certainly speech-related offences after the Southport massacre who, had they pleaded not guilty, could well have avoided prison?
Undoubtedly, yes.
Do you think they were pressurised into pleading guilty in some senses?
I know of one or two, at least, decisions to remand a defendant in custody which would not have been taken. That is to say, they would not have been remanded in custody in normal circumstances. And I think that is likely to have weighed very heavily on those defendants when it came to deciding whether or not to plead guilty, because when you've been taken from your sofa to a police cell, to a court cell, to a prison cell, all in the space of 48 hours for something that you wouldn't have thought was an offence, the feeling that the system is against you and you're not going to win no matter what is likely to be overwhelming. And so you're more likely to take the discount for pleading guilty and take it on the chin rather than try and fight it.
And so, sadly, I think that quite possibly represents a lot of people who were prosecuted and perhaps a lot of people who pleaded guilty to those offences and now sit in prison. Now, there is an argument that some of those who were prosecuted for posting things online after the Southport attack should have those prosecutions reviewed, because after the review of the Prevent failure with Rudy Cabana, the Securities Minister Dan Jarvis has now admitted that he is being treated as a registered terrorist offender. He said the perpetrator has been found guilty of a terrorism-related offence and will therefore be considered as a registered terrorist offender and subject to the associated sentencing procedures, and will be treated as a person convicted of an offence under the Terrorism Act. So this really does beg the question: those who were prosecuted and pleaded guilty for posting things online, many of those may not have hit the media, many of those may not be very well known, but many of them may not be very much more than what Jamie posted online in his video, for which the jury rejected the charge that he was publishing threatening material with intent to stir up racial hatred. But as I say, and I reiterate, this is really an attack upon free speech. And of course, I absolutely condemn any speech which is intended to stir up any kind of racial hatred whatsoever, much less threatening material of any kind. But what was posted here was essentially a video airing frustration. And the jury obviously accepted the defence arguments, but who is to say you might not be next for something that you post online? So, as I say, join Free Speech Union. I'll link them below. Do be careful what you post, but don't feel that you are absolutely restricted. And I think the lesson to be learned here is, really, if you are prosecuted for something, you do need to take proper advice and strongly consider the position whether you plead not guilty to those charges. Because I have absolutely no doubt that had Jamie pleaded guilty, he would now be sitting in a prison cell. But the jury obviously didn't agree with that. So leave me your thoughts and comments below, respectfully and sensibly below, please. And make sure you like the video. I really stress, if you subscribe to my channel and share the video, that will help my channel to grow. It's the only way that happens, that together with you all sharing it with each other online, etc. So I really am grateful for that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.